Yes, hi everybody. I am Jeremy again here with Ramble podcast. Today is a special day because we actually just got done doing a video / photo shoot with my man Rustin over here from DayDream Garage. And I am super stoked to sit down and talk to him. He's got his freshly built Infinity here with us. And we've got a lovely Luna here with us as well. And we're just going to sit here and chit chat for the evening. And today we have Slush by Perry. And last time I had a call because I was above the law. Today we are slushing it. So without much further ado, how are you doing, Rustin?
Pretty good, how are you, man?
Pretty good. Let's go ahead and start with just having you introduce yourself, talk about any social medias that you want to shout out. Go ahead, where's yours?
So, my name is Rustin, 26 years old. Instagram is rusty_10_cam, like Rusty Tin Can. And then also DayDream Motorsports is going to be the IG for our drift group. It consists of me and a bunch of other guys that just basically drift here in Oklahoma locally. Love to hang out, love to get out to events and just drive with each other. That's pretty much what it's about. So definitely follow us on IG. Or if you have ever any questions for us or anything, want to get out and meet some of the guys, feel free to holler at us. We're always welcoming people, always love to talk to people. So.
Absolutely. And I'll make sure that we have some kind of title in here and everything for you on that. Plus, you can take a look down below, and I will make sure to put some of those links in there as well. So, Rustin, to go ahead and get us started, tell us a little bit about how you got into cars.
So, I've always been, ever since I was little, my mom used to tell me I used to just go around and pat tires on cars. I've loved cars ever since I was little bitty. And then I got into a chance where my dad had found me a really good deal on a Infinity G35 sedan. Someone was getting rid of it, had some roof damage. I don't know if the girl who owned it beforehand hit a low branch or what it was, but they're basically selling it for nothing, $800, and it was ran drive, worked perfectly fine. So that's what got me into cars. And then I started hanging out with a bunch of guys that did more of the drag racing scene and things like that. But I had one particular buddy, his name was Stormy, and I'll never forget, I went driving around with him, and we were downtown Oklahoma City, and he drifted around this corner. I'd never seen anything like it, and was like, whoa, that was super cool. And ever since then, I just got really interested in drifting. Went out to an event that I got invited to by some friends in Ada, and they were out there driving, and they just kind of talked me into it because it started raining. They're like, it's only another $20, man. I've got an extra helmet. Go ahead and drive. And so I was like, I sat on it for a little bit. I was like, okay, I'll go out and drive. And this was, fast forward a couple of years, I have my Infinity that I have now. But it was bone stock. I only had it for maybe 3 or 4 months, and took it out to the track, did the little small track, and kind of got the hang of it by the end of the day, and just fell in love with it. I mean, it was a blast. It's an adrenaline rush, and I'm all for that. Used to ride BMX bikes, so always been into stuff that's just been exhilarating and kind of to the extreme, per call it, and just have had a lot of fun doing it ever since. And it's been such a fun journey to be into cars, because you meet a lot of cool people. Get to go do a lot of cool things, and you see different personalities, different people from all aspects of life, and they just, it shows you that it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from, you can be into something like this, and you'll always have other people that you can surround yourself with that or just get along with. So
they say, language, just, we could say that cars are kind of a universal language, because even my travels going into Japan, into Korea, you're able to meet people. A prime example is I had a friend that's a photographer, Carrie G, and while we were in Japan, we messaged him and we were like, hey, I know you have a car, you mentioned to me about coming out to Yokohama if I'm ever out here, and sure enough, $60 later, because Japanese tolls are expensive, we were out at Yokohama, and forever grateful for those experiences. But something I kind of want to piggyback on is, you were mentioning about your first time at a track, and then there was a big track and a small track. So then was this out at Stroud?
This was at Stroud. So it was, I remember we went out there, my friend Ryan at the time had a 8.6, one of the old school, initial D86s. And then I met Brad Hicks through him as well, both of them at the same time that day. and Brad had just gotten into a BRZ, and they kind of talked me out there going and driving. And like I said, I was really skeptical at first. I was like, I don't know what I'm getting into. I don't know nothing about cars, don't know nothing about driving. It looks fun, and then as the day went on, it started to rain, so they really talked me into it. They're like, oh, you can even drive home, you're not going to go through a set of tires or anything, like, you should just do it, man. And I was like, okay, kind of fell into the peer pressure. And I'm so glad I did, like, honestly. Like, it's been like all I've done for the last 5 years. I haven't made a lot of events very recently, just been working on building the car up and getting it ready, but that's the best times, is going out to the track, hanging out with people that that share similar interests, and just getting to basically, kick the shit, hang out with each other. So.
Oh yeah. Well, kind of going into a little bit more about your experience with the Infinity chassis and everything. You started off with the sedan, and now you have this coupe. Talk us through a little bit about the journey in that process.
So it's kind of a funny story, because I started having some issues with the sedan. Fixed a couple of them just to where I could get it out from underneath me, like to sell it to somebody else. And I sold it for about $2,500, and I bought it for $800. And I had some money saved up. And that same day that I sold it, I stumbled across this in Dallas. It's a salvage title. It had like 175,000 miles on it when I bought it. And the guy had it listed at 45. I talked him down to 35 and said, I'll be there the next day if you want to take 35. And he said, you have a deal, just make it down here. And so the very next day after I sold the car, I had a new car in my hands. It's been a long time. I learned, about 16, 17 years old, I learned in my dad's car how to drive stick, and hadn't driven it for like over 4 years, but I picked up right where I left off. Had a blast with it, and then basically kind of drove it around, not knowing what I wanted to do with it. Didn't know like what direction I was going to go, whether it was more like stance or car show, or if I wanted to try to make it fast and go drag strip. I really had no idea where I wanted to go with it. And at one point I had started with like BC coilovers and just kind of like slammed it to the ground. Had it basically like super, super low. And I got tired of that, obviously. That's not for the faint of heart. Shout out to those guys. It's like slam guys, stance guys. Absolute respect to those guys, because I just cannot drive that low. Like, I want some kind of function. They look beautiful, but just the overall drive quality is just something different, and you have to be like okay with constantly scraping the bottom of your car. There's all sorts of things come with stance, and so I learned pretty quickly that I just wasn't about that. And then, like I said, kind of fast forward a little bit, and obviously BQ chassis is not fast. Long story short, they're not fast.
Faster than a K.
That's fair. Faster than a K, but I think the fastest I ever did when I took it down to like Thunder Valley was like a 14.7, like that, and it's slow. But I had fun doing it and enjoyed it. But I realized quickly, like, if I wanted to be fast, like, this was not the chassis unless I went just all out on it, did motor swap, did all that. And at the time, I'm only 20, don't make that kind of money at that time. I decided against that, which just kind of like, well, that's probably not what I'm going to do. And then, fast forward a little bit farther, that's when I go out to Stroud, get into that. And the car's been a pretty big journey. So I drove it roughly stock for probably the first 2 to 3 years that I've had the car. Doing minimal, suspension mods, minimal anything. Basically, all I had done to it was some coilovers at the time, some rear traction arms, and I took the bump stops out so I could just get that little bit of angle with like some extended tie rods, so nothing crazy. Didn't even have a handbrake or anything like that. Basically, just taped up the button and used the. And if anyone that has driven the Z or G chassis knows, the handbrakes on these cars are completely. They're horrible. So how that works. So basically, didn't really use it that much. And then, fast forward a little bit, I got a promotion at work. Started really doing well for myself, and so I was like, okay, well. One thing I've always wanted to do is kind of build this car and make it super cool. Wanted to do the big V8 swap. Everyone talks about that kind of stuff. Everyone wants to do it, but it's not as cheap as people make it out to be. People always go, oh, you can do. I've had buddies that used to tell me, you could LS swap a 240 for like $3,000. I'm like,
now, I will argue and say that is possible, but the most money you're probably going to spend on is going to be a transmission, mounts, and oh fuck, it just slipped my head. But it is possible if you have the ability to do custom work, and that's just the nature of a 240 though. I mean, you can pretty much do everything. But something I want to ask you is then is this the only chassis you've drifted?
Pretty much. The only other chassis I've really drifted, and it was really, I mean, not enough to say that I'm comfortable in that chassis or know enough about that chassis to talk about it. I had an event out at Full Lock. They were doing a team bash event, and it was going to be for me and a couple of my buddies. About 20 minutes before team bash started, I actually blew my first motor in the car. So I was super bummed out about that. They went through and did team bash, and I had to get a replacement to make sure that they had enough people to drive. This was while I was with No Grip Drift. And afterwards, Joe Flowers comes up to me and he's like, hands me his keys, like, why don't you go out and take a drive in my car? Me and him have been pretty close. He actually helped me swap the motor to a new VQ later down the road after this event, but he was pretty comfortable with my driving. I was really comfortable with his driving. So he was kind of like, it was one of those really cool moments where he was just like, I trust you here, take my car. And he drives at the time he drove an RB25 240, a Zinke, and that car was an absolute blast to drive. I loved that car.
I can't imagine. Joe, if you're watching this, I love the way that your S14 sound. Shout out to you now driving a Mustang. It seems like you're doing very well. It's very consistent.
Well, he's in the 350Z now.
That's right. Well, hang on. So did he have a Mustang at one point in time?
He had a Mustang before. He traded I think he traded the Mustang in cash, I believe, for the 240. Don't quote me on that. Right. I know he had the Mustang prior to the 240, and then got rid of the Mustang and got the 240. And right now, I know that he's doing a tear down on the motor. He wants to refresh everything up. Nothing crazy, but really just kind of wants to go through and solidify that it's going to be a pretty bulletproof motor. And so for the time being, we actually went I'd say probably about a year ago now, maybe a year and a half, up to Kansas and picked him up a 350Z as a seat time car. So that's what he's been driving as of recently. Okay. And he really likes the chassis. I've been talking to him about it. It's a really cool thing to see him go from that chassis to my chassis, and be able to kind of talk about the differences and talk about what's so different about my chassis versus his chassis. And he seems to really like it quite a bit. But I haven't got to drive with him in it since. But again, just finished the car up, so hopefully we get to a point where we get to drive together. That's coming up soon because we're actually doing a bachelor party for my buddy Jordan, who actually just left. He's getting married in July. So
congratulations, sir.
So we're gonna do just a little private event at Cam Acres and down in Colgate in May. So.
Nice. Well, from here, sir, I guess, can you tell me a little bit more about DayDream, kind of what that's about? I know it's a drift team, or rather a team of racers. I know that Dakota does some other racing with semi-trucks, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I think there's one more person on the team that does it with him.
It's Justin.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about them. Like, how long have you been with them?
So actually, this is actually really brand new. He had talked about it in the past, and we hadn't really sat down and talked about it like in full up until maybe about a month ago. And so I've been with the group for truly about a month. And so I will say, I've only met a few of the guys. I know Dakota really well. Taylor right now doesn't have a car, but I know Taylor really well. Got to meet Justin. Justin's a really cool dude. I haven't met Jeff yet. I think I've maybe met him once or twice, but I haven't really sat down and talked to him to know him. But they're all super cool dudes, and they all kind of share that same interest. Like I said, they just like to go out and have fun. It's not, most of them are not really about the competitive side. I'd say maybe Dakota is, but the rest of them just really like to get out and get behind the wheel and have fun. So.
Yeah. As it should be. You should still be having fun even at a competitive level, in my opinion on that. But that's awesome, man. I think it's really cool to start to see Oklahoma drifting change from where it started. I mean, I've kind of been around since the beginning of it, you know. Everywhere from like the very first event that would have been ran by a group called Madness Garage, all the way to Nate Hamilton's first visit, to going from Madness Garage to Friction to now Full Lock. And of course, I kind of retired myself, if you will, about a year ago from doing so much media at the events like that. But you know, it's exciting to hear stories like this from you as a driver who's kind of gotten to come in at what I would probably say would have been the greatest time to come in, especially while Stroud was still around, because Stroud was essentially an open parking lot. I had plenty of space. You could run various track layouts. Granted, had its hiccups because it was a rough parking lot. Excuse me.
Yes. Stroud was very rough.
but it was definitely the perfect time to come in because the transition started to happen right following that. So now where we're at with these different tracks and everything, obviously I know you've driven on OMC. I'm sure you've driven at Mac Park. Have you driven at any of the other places, Holland, Cam's Acres, or anything?
I haven't yet. Cam Acres will be, like I said, we're doing that private event with Jordan in May. That'll be my first time touching Cam Acres. We haven't been to Hallett yet. I'd love to go to Hallett, especially with how the car's set up now. I feel like it would be a blast to go out at Hallett. And then the fairgrounds out in Lawton have not been to yet.
Okay.
I know that event seemed like it was a lot of fun because they kind of resembled Stroud in a way, like they set that inside up and kind of just almost did like a figure 8 course, but they just set 2 or 3 people at a time or 1 person at a time. And you can kind of run the course however you want. It's not necessarily just a figure 8.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of guys going out there and just having an absolute blast, like getting door to door out there. It looks like a lot of fun. So that one that I'm super excited about. Cam Acres seems to look like a very fun track, and there's so many layouts from what I see. Excuse me.
I personally have to say that I really do like Cam's Acres. I've never driven there yet. I haven't driven there yet. But from everything that I've experienced camping-wise, I've been out there now 2 or 3 times, I think. Camping's extremely fun out there, man. And, you know, getting to meet all those drivers that come in there because it's at such a crossroads. You know, there's people from Kansas that'll come in, there's people from Texas. So, like, you know, outside of the bachelor party, I highly suggest going out there just to meet people.
Oh, absolutely.
Because there's tons of people that come through. But right here, I'm going to go ahead and stop because I know my camera typically stops at 25 to 30 minutes. I'm going to give you guys a little commercial break with some kind of update of some sort, of course, and we'll be right back. Hey, just wanted to hop on here and say thank you guys so much for checking out this video podcast with Rustin and his beautiful G35 glitter bomb machine. It was an awesome experience actually getting to shoot with him, as well as Jordan Melvin plus Michael Farrell, aka Elevated Explorer. Here is his Instagram page. Be sure to check his work out and give him a follow and a like. However, I wanted to share some of his BTS photos, just kind of showing some of the process. Of course, I'll get into some more details in other videos down the road about what equipment and things like that I'm using and how I use it. I just wanted to kind of hop on here to say thank you to these guys for showing up and giving a handout in terms of like driving the car for rolling shots, as well as getting some behind the scenes shots. From here, I would like to also say, don't forget you can check out my website. On there, I have started actually doing blogs. So they're very small. I try not to take up too much of your day. I say if you can give me 2 to 3 minutes of your time or less, you'll probably find out some information that either A, you didn't know, or B, maybe you were interested in, or C, if you're interested in getting some sort of video work, photo work. We'll have opportunities in there to put some like coupon codes or discount offers in there. And as long as you're signed up via the email crowd, then of course you will be able to partake in that. So with that said, let's get back to the video. Calling ESL guys, we are back again. We had left off kind of talking about Cam's Acres and kind of the experiences out there and some other tracks and opportunities. Obviously, you've talked to us a little bit about going through the changes with your car and everything. Talk us through a little bit about what's next, like any plans to go out to other events, such as like a Texas, Louisiana, Kansas, or anywhere else kind of events.
As far as that goes, I mean, one thing I really built the car was to kind of see. I'd always been really curious about comp, and now they've gotten so exponentially larger than they've been in the last couple years as far as full lot goes. That they've got Pro Am and Pro, like a Pro 3 class for like basically grassroots comp, and so what I've kind of thought about with this car was basically get out to those, obviously get some seat time in the car to enjoy the new build. But go out and do a little bit of comp myself and just kind of see how I do. I'm pretty competitive at nature, I would feel like. And so I've always wondered how I would do. But I didn't want to go, when I built this car, everyone goes, oh, why didn't you cage it? Why didn't you do this, that, the third, And for me, it was a pretty large jump to go from such a stock car to what it is now.
Oh, yeah.
And so I didn't want to make that jump and spend, that kind of extra money to go and say, okay, I don't like comp. It's not for me. I'd rather just have a seat time car. So this was kind of like the middle ground for me. Like, it's a good car. It's going to make good power. It's, got everything that it needs to be competitive. But it's not along the levels of being Pro-Am where I've got cage and I've got fire suppression system and on all of those things. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'd love to make some trips out to some Lone Star events. But for me, my job is kind of strenuous. I work weekends pretty much all the time. So weekends are pretty hard for me to get off. But what's really nice about the full lock events is that they do 2-day events. So like Sundays are a lot easier for me to get off than Saturdays are. And so that makes it a really nice deal, especially now because I can take those Sundays off and not really have to, get a bitching from anybody from work and still be able to go and have fun, So that's kind of the plan, and especially since the comp events fall on Sundays, it's just been kind of lined out in my favor. I really wanted to start last year, but of course, build took a little bit longer than I expected, and that was because I had never been into anything like this before.
Rome wasn't built in a day. Take your time.
Yeah.
That is literally something that I'm kind of at a crossroads with even my own personal build. And I'll be turning 30 next month. And I've had a total of 6 240s.
Oh, wow.
And the current 240 I have now is probably the nicest one I've had. So it says a lot.
Yeah.
It says a lot, but I definitely say I respect the fact that people that take their times to do their builds, no matter what it is. So that way you don't miss out on something that ends up being a little problem turns into a bigger problem.
Yeah, well, we've been chasing down little problems with my car, me and Dak, and we worked on some fuel pressure issues. I'm working on some blow-by and crankcase pressure issues. I think I've got it all sorted out and have a plan of attack for it. But you're absolutely right. One thing that a lot of people have asked me after the last couple of places I've been in the car over the last week or two since I finally got it back home is they're just kind of asking me like, oh, what's it like to have something like this? And I was like, man, honestly, don't rush it. It's your build. You take your time, go at your pace. But you don't want to rush something and go back and realize, well, I could have done this different and kind of regret it. I told myself when I first got the motor to swap this, which was in January of last year, I was like, okay, I'm going to have the whole car ready to go by May. Because I was like, I'm going to go and compete all season long, like in this new car. And here comes, like September. I'm working through September and like the first part of October just to get to one of the last full lock events of the season last year just to do a shakedown. And I don't regret it whatsoever. I mean, absolutely would I love to have it done quicker. Everyone would. Everyone would love to do a kind of snap of the fingers and be done with what they want to be done. But that also takes away from, I feel like, some of the respect that you have for your own vehicle and the respect you have for yourself for the time that you spend in the car. I remember when I'm building this from January to like September, October, it was, I'd go to work, and my job I work probably 60, 70 hours a week on a minimum. And then I would turn around on my days off and I would go to my buddy's shop in Lexington, Ben. Shout out Ben if you ever watch this. He's just not super into drift stuff, but he'll probably end up, I'll probably end up telling him about this to watch. He has a shop and he let me work on my car there, and he helped me do a lot of this build. I did not do this by myself, especially with it being my first build. I had a lot of help from other people. And we sat down and he would spend, we'd kind of line our days off together, and we would spend like 10 o'clock in the morning till like 1, 2 o'clock in the night, like, 2 days in a row, and then I turn back to work and go 60, 70 hours or more in a week. And I did that for 8 months straight. And it was very, very tiresome. I got to a point where I just kind of was almost burnt out on it. And that's when I turned around and started doing like the cosmetics to the car. Because my dad has done paint and body for over 40 years, and so he was like, "You need to take a break from that and do something else." And I took his advice, got a lot of help from him on that side of it. And like I said, it's just been an absolute blast. And you got to do all these different connections, and like I got to spend a lot of time with my dad that I didn't when I was growing up doing this, because we share a mutual interest now. Yeah. And so between that and between him and Ben helping me, Jordan's helped me significantly. Ryan's helped me. Joe has helped me. It's all hand in hand. You having good people around helps quite a bit. But definitely don't rush it, because it's one of those things when you get done, you finally look at it, you think about all the time you spent on it, and you just have a new profound respect for your car and for yourself. Really,
I couldn't agree with you any more than that, man. I think you hit it on the head. I think that whenever I was growing up, 13-year-old Jeremy thought that 30-year-old Jeremy would probably be, a badass 240 or something like that by now. And the truth of the matter is, life happens. There's other opportunities and things that go on, and to be able to sit back and take a look at your car or whatever it is that you may be working on, it's a big blessing, man. And I really appreciate you saying that, because a lot of my purpose for wanting to do more of these podcasts is to try and hit for someone that is that 18-year-old kid or even that 13-year-old kid, because I've been to car shows where I've seen people that have extremely nice cars that a little kid might come up and touch it or, oh, that's cool or something. They're kind of about it,
Yeah.
And it's always been my point that anytime I see a kid at the car show and if they like my car, they want to take a picture, they want to sit in, you want to press the gas pedal, go for it, man.
Yeah.
Go for it.
And,
what is it going to do to me? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And you see, and a lot of people take that, like I said, the time deal into just this big ordeal, because you have all these people, especially now. It's 2022. You've got people like Adam LZ and TJ Hunt and people that have made a significant name for themselves with YouTube and in the car industry. They'll turn around and they'll do 2 episodes or 3 episodes between a course of 2 to 3 weeks, and they built a whole Pro-Am car, or they built a whole show car. They're like, oh, I just bought my 13th Lamborghini, and people are like, man, I wish I could make moves like that. And it's just not that simple. Not everyone has, not everyone has that luck. And I won't say that it's it's a golden spoon in their mouth. They definitely earned it.
That, and they have a team. So you got to remember that. Even kind of piggybacking what you're saying about Adam and Z on that one, man. I was watching a video of him doing drifting at, I can't remember where it was, but it was the name of the video was Redneck Crashes My S15 or whatever. And he ended up with a barely even any damage, in my opinion, on a fiberglass body kit for his S15. Granted, it's an S15, right? But he was no worries, once the car gets back home, we got a fiberglass guy, back there. He'll take it. You have a team. Whenever you have a team, those kinds of things can happen overnight like that. Whenever you're doing it by yourself, unless you're Papadakis, who's just a badass builder all around, you're probably going to have some time set aside and figure out some things. And it's a process. But the great thing about it is that you know how to take something apart, and you also know how to put it together. So thank you for sharing that, man.
Of course.
Seriously, I really, really do appreciate that. Last few things here, because I won't hold you up too much longer here. I said, I was going to keep it kind of short and sweet to the point. In terms of another chassis, what would you probably choose for drifting?
So this is going to be one of those that I feel like is it's becoming more popular, and people are calling it the cheater chassis. But I would love a Corvette. Just absolutely hands down. I've always liked Corvettes, even growing up. And I've had friends who've had Corvettes. Stormy, before he passed away, had a C6 that he let me drive. That he had done a lot of work to, and it was to go just straight down the road, not doing what I'm doing. But you see people just, do minimal stuff to these cars, these C5 and C6 chassis, and they're, basically ready to go and just compete, or do whatever they want to do with the car, and they don't really have to fight very many issues or have to do very many mods to be competitive or to be like where you can go out and just absolutely love enjoying to drive that car. So that would probably be it for me. And I know that's probably one of those like, oh, well, of course everyone wants that. That's, the cheater chassis. But I mean, I like the way they look. I think they're a beautiful looking car. They come with that, LS motor already in it, obviously. And like I said, you could do some knuckles, a handbrake, a seat, and maybe coilovers. And really that's about all you have to do. And then you're good to go and pretty much drift and have fun. So.
Absolutely, man. I like that. I think for me, if I'm being honest, I've been eyeballing IS300s, but low-key, high-key, I really would prefer just to grab another 240.
Yeah.
And granted, like, we could say that, well, sorry guys, we did have a camera malfunction here, battery died, so we're just going to kind of re-ask him his last question here. And this was kind of picking up about if he had an opportunity to pick up a different chassis, or what chassis currently would he pick up for drifting? And if you'll go ahead and re-answer that for us again.
So for me, I know it's kind of one of those, a lot of people call it like a cheater chassis, but it'd probably be a Corvette, like a C6, C5, C6 definitely if I could find a good deal on and just afford it. They don't take much to be basically drift ready, and you can just go out to any track, anywhere, whether it be a small track or it be a very large, track that requires a little bit more power. You can do either one of those with just basically like knuckles or some slight suspension mods up front, some coilovers. I would suggest probably a seat and a handbrake, and really you could just go out and have an absolute blast anywhere. Or if you wanted to be competitive, you could do that too. I see a lot of guys that pick those up, and like I said, they do a cage and they do maybe a couple other things more than what I've mentioned, but then they'll go out there and just compete with some of the guys that have fully built other cars. And so it's one of those things, like I would love to have one of those as even just a seat time car, because they just seem to be set up super, super well.
I can definitely see that. I know.
Or obviously a 240. I mean, like, like I said earlier, I drove Joe's and I absolutely loved it. But I just don't have enough experience in it to know whether I like it or not. I will say one thing is he had I think he had the Villains kit, and I noticed once you get into full lock, you have to really pull it back. And I didn't know how I felt about that, but it felt great in full lock though. I mean, you could just kind of drive that and it felt like you were never going to spin out. It had plenty of angle, so.
I definitely understand that. I know from my own experiences with 240s, yes, that is definitely a problem. Even right now, that is a problem that I worry about with just cut knuckles and extended oil control arms, is that at full angle, depending on what size tire I run, then I'm probably going to run right into it. So, yeah, that's definitely a problem with 240s, but aftermarket kits do fix those. I appreciate you giving me a chance to sit here and talk to you. It's amazing getting to know more about your story. I know that from a personal level, like I've only kind of seen you passing and going, that we've only seen each other at drift days. So it's awesome to kind of talk to you and know that, back history about how you got your car and kind of where you're at today. I think it's awesome, man. Keep going, dude. Thank you, man.
It's been a pleasure to hang out with you today. I'm absolutely ecstatic to see, the photos and videos that come out of all this. And it's been an enjoyable experience getting to hang out with you and spend time doing all of this, especially being on the podcast. Don't get to sit down and do a lot of this stuff, but I do definitely enjoy it. And I'm glad that you've had me on here.
Thank you, man. As a last question here, I wanted to try and start doing something. I know the last podcast we didn't do this. Matt, again, as someone else who, if you're watching, this is something that we've talked about wanting to do. But instead of doing the one that we typically do, which is going to be revolving around, would it be your Dream 5 car garage, right, or something like that, I want to do drag, drift, and daily. So you have to pick 3 different cars for each. What would you pick?
Oh, man. Okay, so if I could do anything drift I will say, I know it's brand new. There's only one of them out there right now. But I'm just absolutely in love with that new Z chassis. I mean, I haven't ever seen one, haven't drove one, haven't heard one, nothing. But I absolutely love the way they look. And Chris Forsberg did an amazing job of making that car look just phenomenal. So for drift, probably something like that. Daily, I'll be honest with you. I've got a company car that I drive right now, and it's a Mercedes GLC 300 AMG package, and I love the crap out of that car. It'd probably be some sort of Mercedes, GLC class, like something, because it's got a lot of room. If you need to put stuff in the back, you can. Good gas mileage, drives very smooth. Good sound system, something along those lines. Nothing too crazy. Or maybe just a newer Chevy pickup truck. Like I've got a Chevy truck, and I really like mine. It's just a little beat up, but that's what you expect with with a cat eye. That's what you expect. Drag, that is a tough one. I almost want to do something classic, like or just an older car. Like I really like Fox body style Mustangs. Or even like that same era, like Camaros, really like those too. I've never ever even thought about that. That's a good question. Probably something along those lines as far as like a drag car, or if I talking about maybe something more modern. Like I said, I'd still like the Corvette chassis for just about anything. So probably a Corvette if we're going to talk about something newer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in all fairness, I will make sure that I answer this question too, which of course, if you're watching and you watch other episodes, yes, my answers will be a little bit different. But for this, man, as of right now, I would probably say that for a daily, I'd probably go with like I don't know, I'd probably go with something extra cheap, honestly. I can tell you, honestly,
I got Prius or something.
Well, after I got a chance to drive a Hershey 6-speed Corolla, whatever he had, it was like a 2016 Corolla or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he would tell the story and be like, I think you fucked my clutch up. But I mean, it seemed like it was a perfect little daily go-getter. I mean, it didn't really have much room, but the gas mileage, oh man. I think we made it down to Texas and back several times, without ever filling up, really. And we went down there and drove around and everything, and it's Hershey we're talking about. This motherfucker, we're going to eat here, we're going to go here, but we're going to take a shit here, and we're going to eat here. So, we went places. For drag racing, I wouldn't mind doing a 240. And I know anyone watching this, you see my 240, you're probably like, oh, is that what you're going to do with it? Mm-hmm. Yes, I will be going to the drag strip occasionally, but for now, it's just currently being built, and we'll see what happens afterwards. But for drifting, if money wasn't a factor, specifically, I would say if Frederick Osborne was selling his car, I'd probably try and pick that up.
Yeah, it's a sick car.
It'd be an expensive car for upkeep, but I think something like an A90 Super or something newer like that would be really cool. I mean, they're coming out with the 6-speed next year. So.
Yeah, I was talking about this to Eric the other day. I was like, man, I have been in love with that Z ever since I've heard, twin turbo V6 and a manual, and then it's kind of they bullied Toyota into doing a 6-speed, and so I really like the A90 too. So I'm really torn. If I ever had a chance to grab either one of those, I honestly don't know. That would be a very hard choice to make.
I would probably say that the chassis wise, I would probably say that the A90 would probably be the superior chassis when it comes down to modifications, bang for the buck in terms of grip, handling, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I would probably guess that a Nissan Z car is going to be a really fast, out-of-the-box fucking car. And the cool thing about it is that people have already started making those little, you remember back in the forum days, or were you ever on forums?
I wasn't, no.
So back in the days of forums, dating myself, right? Back in the days of forums, there was a lot of people that would make GIFs, and these GIFs would be little animated looking characters with animated cars by them and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I recently had saw one of the 400ZX, or the new Z that's coming out rather.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at it, I was just like, damn, man. It was a shot of the rear side of it, kind of 3/4 quarter, where it's facing like this. And those taillights, man, they've got the classic 300ZX style where it's got the kind of black stripping or kind of gated look on it. And man, I'm like, that car is just going to be another timeless car, honestly. And I hope that, you know, if they do decide to end the Z car after this, that whatever predecessor they bring to the table for it, it's able to start a new life and create something big like that. You know? Because the Z car is a car meant for everything, honestly. I mean, you can enjoy a good day out, you can go to the track, you can, you know,
you can drag it. I mean, you see people for anywhere from like 240Z, 300Z, you know, 350, 370. They do love. I mean, you see them do drag racing, you see them do drift, you see them do stance. I mean, in every single, you know, era of that car. And they, I mean, it's really like, it's a pretty formidable car as far as like you talk about some cars that have a lot of historical presence. That is one I feel like, you know, you go up there, obviously a lot of people go, we talk about like the Supra, you talk about the Skyline, you know, but, and even like the 8.6 chassis. But I feel like the Z has a special place in history with every generation of it, from 240Z, you know, all the way up.
Yes. And I couldn't agree with you anymore on that. Rustin, man, I think that's going to be a wrap. Thank you so much, man. And we will be posting this up sometime soon this month. Stay tuned, guys. We've got a lot more to come. Be sure to check out his video, his feature video of his car, as well as check out slammedia.co and Morocco Boy. Check out my blog, because I will be making some blog posts about this and some other things that I've been doing lately. Appreciate the slush beer.
Of course, man.
I hope you have a good night, sir.
Thank you.
Meantime, later, guys. Thank you, sir.
Of course, man.
If you've made it this far, you deserve a cookie. Thank you so much for watching and checking out this video about Rustin and kind of how he got to this beautiful G35 of his. I do appreciate you guys continuing to watch, even though we had a bit of a hiccup with my camera dying there. I'm so sorry, we just kind of blended the clips there instead of breaking to another commercial. But in this commercial, I do have some other information for you, of course. I wanted to first off say, if you are, of course, going to be in the Oklahoma or tri-state area, of course, there is always going to be Cam's Acres racing site that's always available. Right now, at this time of video that you're watching, this is roughly around the end of June. So they did have an event on the 25th through the 26th. However, they do have an invitational only event going on July 2nd through the 3rd, and then they resume with normal open events. It looks like July 30th through the 31st. And then it looks like they're teaming up with Full Lock Drift for a Pro-Am event August 13th through the 14th, which is actually going to be whenever the next event is for Full Lock Drift as well. It says here in their schedule, Cam Acres Pro-Am Drift event round 3. So if you are going to be looking for any kind of competitions, grassroots, or anything like that to look for, I think that's going to be a really great course to see some awesome tandeming, and hopefully it'll bring out even more of those out-of-state guys, because I love seeing new cars, and I'm sure everyone else does. But outside of this, guys, again, like I said, thank you so much for watching. I do have new content coming out on the way. It's going to be, of course, of me working with Lady Hinata. She's going to start getting some love done to her, as we have a turbo motor that we have yet to fully discuss and show. And then, of course, we have the body kit and some other things and some progress videos, whatnot, that has to be created. So thank you. Please hang tight and tell a friend, tell a brother, sister, cousin, everybody. Hey, let's go ahead and connect and see what we can build out of this. Later, guys.